my heart wasn't in it anymore. And a lot of it is tied to the heart of that question. I have absolutely gotten sexual assaults dismissed for clients that in my heart I believed were guilty.
Willie D. Live.
Let's go back to mitigating circumstances. Uh, and when you're working with one of your clients, right?
Okay.
Because oftentimes defense attorneys get criticized for defending people who the public thinks is guilty and deserves to be severely punished. But your job as a defense attorney is to mitigate the circumstances. And in other words, give that person, it's going to be, he going to get some type of, it's going to hurt, but your job is to make sure it don't hurt as much. But what about when somebody is guilty and you smooth get them off? Like, let's say a rapist. Have you ever represented a rapist?
Yeah, I've
Someone that's
represented
accused
a
of
number of
rapist?
people
A rape?
accused and people guilty of sexual assault.
So how do you reconcile defending a rapist?
Well, I do believe in again, I've stopped doing it, right?
Yeah.
I stopped doing it. I slowly shut down my practice
And
over about 2 years.
Why'd you do that?
Well, I've got other businesses that, if you're a real trial lawyer, a real criminal defense trial lawyer, you are tied to the courthouse and you have to be there all the time. It's both, it's legalistic, but it's also relationship driven. Presence matters. Your clients want to see you, not your associates. And I just, I've got another non-legal business, and then I've got obviously me and Quan LX Farrakhan have our show on Fox Soul that also airs in San Francisco and here locally. So I've got time constraints, but I also, my heart wasn't in it anymore, and a lot of it is tied to the heart of that question. I have absolutely gotten sexual assaults dismissed for clients that in my heart I believed were guilty, right? But the state could not make their case. I was very good at that very early on. I would charge more for a sexual assault than I would for a murder, right? A murder, there's some people that need a killing, right? I mean, you can justify a murder. Not always, right? But there are people that bring the bullet onto themselves, whereas there's never a justification for sexual assault. Either you're falsely accused, which is probably somewhere between 3 and 7% of the people at the very most, right? That's being generous, of the people accused of it. Overwhelmingly, it is people that are guilty that are not prosecuted. That's typically the problem. But I've most certainly defended some innocent people, and I've defended some guilty people and exonerated them. But I fully subscribe to the belief that defense attorneys are one of the most important components in our system, right? And if you take an oath, and when I took an oath to be a police officer, I took it seriously. When I took an oath as an attorney, I take it very seriously. But your oath is to zealously represent the interests of the client. You have to put everything else aside. And if you choose to take on that representation, it is your job to try to win at all costs. And you cannot consider, your personal feelings, your friends and family's feelings, society's feelings, because if you do, you're not doing the job you're supposed to. And it really, you can trace it back in America to John Adams, our second president, who got famous in Boston because he was the only attorney in town in colonial Boston, willing to defend the British redcoats that had shot into a crowd during a protest, right? Now, they had been attacked. People were throwing rocks at him and trying to get at him. And he actually exonerated them, right? Vilified, family was threatened. We've seen that in America a number of times. And I will tell you, there are cases that I've said no to, right? After I got to the position where I didn't need to take cases, financially. And there are cases that I've been put on by judges. I never really did a lot of indigent work, and I wasn't a public defender, but there are judges that'll say, hey, especially in smaller counties, I want you to do this case, where it's been pretty horrible. But again, you take an oath, and you are representing this one person fighting back against the great weight and authority of the state.